All right, it's Monday morning. You set up your project perfectly. You stare at the timeline and it hits you. It's that same thing that every single editor experiences, blank timeline syndrome. Where do you start? I'm going to share with you in this episode the one question to ask yourself that will help you overcome blank timeline syndrome every single time. So in this episode, you're going to hear the exact question to ask yourself, why it works, and the exact process that I've used to take my first draft process down from 5 days to just 2 hours. My name is Shiny. I'm an Emmy-nominated documentary and commercial editor that spent the last 15 years working with clients like Vice, BBC, and Ogilvy. And it's my goal to help you overcome randomly editing from the gut so that you can consistently craft engaging edits that use high-level storytelling tactics and industry standard workflows that premium clients will pay £300 to £500 per day for. I want to take you back to the early days of my career. I remember one of the first jobs, it was one of the first documentaries I was working on for Vice. We had maybe 20 hours of footage, and I had a fairly generous timeline to turn this around in. And so my process was to quite literally sit there and watch all of the footage. I'd sit there in real time, taking notes on paper, and Friday would come along and the client would step in and they'd ask for an update. And I would say, well, I'm still reviewing the footage. I could tell in that moment that the client was a little bit disappointed. But in my head at that time, I was thinking, well, you shot so much footage. I have to go through it all. Otherwise, what am I making here? I don't know what I'm making. But looking back, it was a very, very naive perspective. And actually, there are faster ways to get through all of that footage and help you understand what it is that you are creating. Because even if you do watch all of that footage in real time, you can still get to the end and be clueless as to what it is you are actually making. So even if you take 5 days to watch all that footage or 2 hours to skim through it, you're still faced with the same problem. A similar situation happened quite recently with one of the students in Unsplice. During the group mentoring session, they came in and they were stuck on an edit for 3 days. They were trying to create an observational documentary. So the whole story they're trying to create was quite linear. This happens, then this happens, then this happens. But the whole thing was feeling a bit flat. And the editor was a little bit disappointed with what had come out of just taking things chronologically and putting them on a timeline. Their goal was to just tell it as it happened. So I said, okay, great. What's the point in that person's story? What is it that the audience is getting from this story? They just kind of paused for a minute and thought and said, I don't know. I just wanted to tell the story as it happened. But if there's no reason for the audience to watch, then they're just going to tune off. And that is what you're feeling if you're watching it back and it doesn't quite feel right. And so there's one question that we can ask ourselves during this process, especially at this point, right at the beginning, after we've reviewed the footage, or if we have a briefing from the producer or from the director before we've watched the footage. And that is, what should the audience feel? Every edit that you create, every film, every video, should either make the audience want to feel something or do something, or both. That's it. That's the end goal of every single video you ever make. Now, of course, with commercials, typically the goal is to make the audience click something, do something, or buy something. Go to a website, download an app, and buy this pair of sneakers. And with a documentary or a film, but we're not actually trying to sell something, the goal is to make the audience feel something. And those most powerful films that you can remember left the strongest emotional impact on you when you left the cinema. Think about the first time you watched Inception and how you felt just as the film ended, because it left an emotional impact on you. The stronger the emotional impact, the stronger the memory. And you can use that as leverage in your edits. If you're creating a commercial, if you're creating some branded content, or even just an interview-led corporate video. If you can leave on an impact, create an emotional impact on the viewer, then that video is going to have a much more powerful memory. And so the question that you should always ask yourself at the beginning of every single edit is why? Why are you making this? Why should anyone watch this? What should the audience feel? Once I figured this out, I could take that 5-day process of just reviewing footage down to 2 hours, because my new process is now thinking about, okay, I'll have a talk with the producer or the director to get an overview of what's been shot. What footage do we have? And what's the kind of story we're looking at? And then I can understand the outcome of this film. And that is my film's why. And if you ask why 5 times, you get down to the emotional core of anything. If the answer to the question at first is something perhaps a task-based, then if you keep asking why 5 times, you'll get down to the emotional core of whatever the reason is for something happening. That gives you a framework now through which to view all of that footage that you have. It helps you understand the story that you're building, even if you're creating a commercial. If the goal of a commercial is to communicate how soft and airy a shoe's sole is, then you know you'll want to avoid any footage that looks a bit clunky. And that gives you a framework of footage to avoid. And that's the key here, because you might have received 5 days worth of footage to review. But if you spend your time reviewing absolutely everything, think about in the end how much of that footage didn't even touch the timeline that you wasted your time reviewing. Or if you have a clear understanding of what the audience should feel or do at the end of your film, your commercial, your documentary, your piece of branded content, your corporate interview, that gives you a framework of footage to avoid. And that's more important than what should I be looking for. If you know what to avoid, that's going to cut out 50%, maybe more, of the footage that you have been given. So whenever you start a new edit, just ask yourself why. And once you have this, if you're working with dialogue footage, transcribe it. Premiere has it built in now. Most of these tools are super easy to get hold of. Transcribe all the footage that's come in. What you can do then, once you understand what it is you're looking for, you can search for keywords in the transcript, and you can see what videos have those keywords, and you know kind of roughly some time codes as well to review. So now all of a sudden 20 hours of footage has been condensed down to maybe 5 hours of stuff that you actually need to look through. And if you're watching that back at 1.5 times, or even 2 times, or even 3 times, because you've switched on the subtitles and now you're skimming text as opposed to listening, which is a lot faster, well, now you can skim through most of that footage in a couple of hours. And so using that super fast technique, by the end of day 1, you can have some rough pulls of dialogue or some action to put into that documentary, commercial, whatever it is that you are creating. This builds excitement for you, it builds momentum for you, and it gets the client excited and on board. And that's the most important thing. Even if it takes you 5 days to get to that first draft, if you've got something to show the client on day 1, you just earn a huge amount of respect. So I want to share with you some real world examples of this perspective and how you can use this. And the first one comes from an editor that was cutting a fisherman documentary. They had so much beautiful B-roll that had been shot. They were kind of overwhelmed and they didn't know what to add into their documentary. How do you choose? They asked me. And we quite simply did this. We asked why. What's the film's why? What is the outcome of this? And the idea was to connect on an emotional level with the human side of commercial fishing. So the idea is to build a relationship with the person behind the story and build empathy with them. And that's the only way that we could build. And so when we ask this question, why? What should the audience feel by the end of this film? The conclusion was that the audience should feel the human side of commercial fishing. So with that new frame, to view all of the footage, the editor was able to look at the dialogue as conversational beats. It meant ignoring all of that footage, that beautiful, beautiful ocean view footage. As gorgeous as it is, it's not connecting us on an emotional level with the human side of commercial fishing. That's not to say that we should never use that footage at all ever. It's to say that right now we're at the beginning stage of the edit and we need absolute focus. So let's ignore that for now and come back to it if we have time. And that's the important distinction. If we have time, we can come back to that. That then becomes the client's problem of overshooting or not having enough time in the schedule. It's not that getting that first draft down. It's like, okay, you've given me this much footage in this little time, rather than saying, well, this is going to be sloppy. It's more a case of, okay, well, I won't have an opportunity to scan all of the best bits. So I'll put in what I think is good enough rather than it being perfect. And so with this new frame of looking through the film's why, that editor managed to eliminate about 50% of all the footage that they needed to look at. And so was able to get a first draft assembly together super fast. In another case, there was an editor I was speaking to who was creating some social media assets for an underwater diver. And the diver sent them tons and tons of footage of underwater filming, fish, mammals, whales, dolphins, all sorts kind of swimming around, and them diving as well. And so there's no story there inherently. And so this editor was really struggling to understand, what do I build from this? So we asked the question, why? What should the audience feel or do by the end of this edit? And the editor said, after a moment of thinking, the audience should feel like they're discovering something amazing. And that unlocked it. Okay, well, if it should feel like they're discovering something, then we have to tease the fact what it is they're going to discover. We have to go from nothing to something. There has to be a reveal. That gives us the frame to view all the footage that we currently have available to us. And so we can ignore any footage that doesn't match that brief. So whatever footage looks like it's building anticipation to something, that goes in. So once I have realized what my film's why is, I will write it down on a post-it note. Post-it notes are an editor's best friend. They're one of the unsung heroes of our workflow. Take a post-it note, write on there what the film's why is. What should the audience feel or do at the end of this? Then once you've done that, generate your transcripts. You can search for keywords if you like that match your film's why, and that should give you a chunk of footage that you should and shouldn't be looking at. Pull down some selects onto a timeline that serve this purpose. And now, rather than looking at 20 hours of stuff, you've got a timeline of 5 hours or 2 hours that you can scrub through. And you're using this as a reference for your gold. Now, if there are any gaps in your story or stuff that you feel like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I had that? That's when you go back and you quickly scrub through the rest of the stuff that you didn't have in that selects timeline to see if that exists. But now you're a lot more structured with what you're looking for rather than watching 20 hours or 15 hours of footage just because you are looking for something specific, which means you can use keywords to search for certain topics. You can also scan text and look for keywords visually, and it just speeds up the entire process. Then once you've done that, you're pulling down some of the main bulky structures of dialogue onto your timeline and building together what seems like just patchy bits of dialogue that serve the film's why, but don't necessarily make sense yet. And so that's how you go from blank timeline to something. And that's the goal. We just want something on the timeline, because as soon as you got something, it sparks ideas, it gives you momentum. You come in on day 2 and you're not looking at another blank timeline. You have something to work from. And not only that, you get to impress the client with your speed, because they weren't expecting something so soon. That gives you massive amounts of respect and trust from that client. It means that they are more likely to book you again in the future. And that's the goal. It's not to put other editors down, but it's to put yourself forward in the ranks, to become top of mind, not second of mind. And if you're not quite earning £300 to £500 per day and you're wondering how can you get there, then come book a call with me. Let's chat. We can talk about your current situation and where you'd like to be, and we will talk exactly about how we can get you there. And it's my goal by the end of that call to help you have a clear understanding of your exact next steps to help you achieve your career goal. If you want to book some time together, just click the link below or go to unsplice.com/help. Now, the framework that we're going to be talking about is one of those that's going to put you at the top of the client's mind when they're thinking about which editor to book next. And that's critical for a successful career. It means you'll be able to put together a rough assembly 1 or even 2 days faster than your competition, which is going to land you massive kudos.